As I said, I'm certainly hoping for an increase in the Labor vote in those seats where they're counting the Legislative Council first, because those booths do favour, I think, more the Labor Party. So it's still, quarter of the vote counted, just over. So I hope to see an improvement in Labor's vote as we go on tonight.
Yeah, and Nick McKim, sorry, we talked earlier too about Braddon and that Craig Garland vote. What's your expectation on the way that his preferences will flow?
Well, it's a question of really on those numbers of whether, we get cut first or Craig Garland gets cut first. And, Anthony's been very clear that at the moment we're looking at numbers from booths that, Craig would be expected to do quite well in, and some of the bigger booths in some of the urban areas of Braddon, perhaps he won't do so well, and you'd expect our vote to be higher there. Look, Craig's a bit of an environmentalist, but not totally. He still supports logging the Tarkine. He's been very strong on fish farms, as have the Greens. And by the way, I think that's been a real sleeper issue this election, the fish farms. Richard Flanagan launched his book Toxic only a week and a half ago, and it's in its fourth reprint already, and a lot of Tasmanians are asking why we're giving these big aquaculture corporations free rein to destroy our marine environment. So I think that's been something that has swung some votes to us. In Braddon, look, it's a wait and see for us. Our vote looks too low probably to win a seat in Braddon, but we would expect a reasonable preference flow from Craig Garland if he gets cut before we do.
We're going to cross to Leon Compton now, who's on the tally room floor. What have you got for us, Leon?
Well, thank you very much, Guy. I am indeed down on the tally room floor, and it is lovely to have your company as the room starts to fill behind me. As we mentioned earlier, last of the tally rooms in the entire country, and this tally room is starting to fill now. Of the 350 seats here, maybe a quarter of them are filling, but more and more people coming in from downstairs and up into the Grand Chancellor Hotel just behind you. I want to say good evening to Paul, who's brought his young son Flynn down with us this evening. Paul, good evening to you.
Thank you, Leon.
Why have you decided to come here tonight, Paul?
Well, I've been down to the tally room quite a few times, and I think this could be the last time a tally room exists in all of Australia. I'd like to see it go forward, but I wanted to give Flynn the opportunity to come down and see it.
What are the issues that you think were resonating in the electorate as we headed into the polls today?
Health and education and the environment were really important for me. I work in the wine industry, and we're really reliant on the land and the environment that we live in, so that's really important for Flynn's future time on the vineyard.
Well, indeed. Thank you for coming down this evening. Let's have a bit of a look around the tally room this evening. You can start to see behind me, Guy, lots of people are coming in here, but still a few empty chairs. There's an expectation, because typically this is an event where people mill, that maybe some people have been put off by the need to sort of register on the way in the door and observe social distancing, as we're doing here this evening. But Liz has come down to the tally room and has been sitting here patiently. In fact, Liz is watching the ABC's coverage on the app on her phone. Hello, Liz.
Difficult to hear, yes.
Liz, tell me why you've come down here tonight.
Well, because it's accessible, I think, one reason. Because it's Tasmania, it's easy to do this sort of thing. And I've never done it before. And I thought rather than watching on television, I'd watch it in real life.
And Liz, from our conversations earlier, you were hoping perhaps that Peter Gutwein would be rewarded for his handling of COVID-19?
Well, I think COVID-19's not over yet, and I think that Peter Gutwein and Sarah Courtney have done very well looking after us in Tasmania. And when the borders open, who knows what will happen. We can't really relax for quite some time. I've had my first AstraZeneca. But, there's a way to go. But we're lucky in Australia. I mean, we've got two good main parties, and I wouldn't be devastated if Labor won, but I do think that we have been in very safe hands. Yeah.
You're a politics watcher. You've been watching Anthony and his screen there. What is your expectation of how things will play out tonight?
Well, it's going to be close, I think. I can't actually hear, but it's interesting seeing Anthony because he's very animated in what he does, isn't he?
Well, he is indeed. Liz, it's lovely to see you tonight. So there we are, Guy, just a little of what we're learning on the floor of the tally room this evening as the count continues. The way that it typically works is that the politics watchers who perhaps don't necessarily have parties that they support particularly will come down earlier in the evening, and then as we get a little closer to knowing a result, people will come into the tally room from the major parties. I've already seen Mike Dutto, who was one of the independents, come down here and start start to circulate. Ben Shaw, who was running for the Legislative Council, and we're starting to see his poll results come in. It looks like Craig Farrell may hold his seat in the upper house, but he's been through this evening. You saw Meg Webb from the Legislative Council a little earlier. So as people continue to come into the party room, we'll bring you all the action from Australia's last tally room through the course of the evening.
Thanks for that, Leon. Now we're going to go to Brian Mitchell, the federal member for Lions. But first, let's get an update from Anthony on how Lions is looking.
Well, we've got a 32% of the vote count now. The Liberal vote has now steadied up just over 50%, 3/4. Everyone expected them to hold their 3 seats. The Labor vote's risen slightly to 1.78. The Greens are on 0.64. The other parties have dropped away as the count has proceeded. If we look at the leading candidates, Rebecca White is elected, Guy Barnett is elected, both over a quota. Mark Shelton will be elected, and given John Tucker's well ahead of other candidates, you'd expect that John Tucker will win the 3rd Liberal seat. Now, just let me, I'll break down the Labor ticket on its own. Janet Lambert finished second last time, but was passed by Jen Butler on preferences after Rebecca White went out. Whether that'll happen again, we'll have to wait and see. But just to go back to the party totals, the change in vote, not much change. Again, a slight rise in the Green vote, slight fall in the Labor vote, slight rise in the Liberal vote. But overall, a definite 3 Liberals. I would say probably 2 Labor in the end. I expect that on the postals and the pre-polls, Labor vote will increase slightly. So in the end, not much change in Lions.
Thanks, Anthony. Brian Mitchell, good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Does that surprise you that Labor seems to be struggling to get that second quota in your seat there?
No, look, this happened last election as well, so this is pretty much a rerun of 2018 where the Liberals got 3 and we got 2, coming down to preferences at the end. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the second spot for Labor. It came down to Jen Butler and Janet Lambert last time, and it looks like history's repeating.
Brian, it's Emily Baker here, and this is an issue that's relevant to the state election and also to you. We're seeing areas like Sorell grow quite significantly. I guess you could say the gentrification of Sorell. You've picked up part of Launceston into Lions during a boundary redistribution. Does Labor have more work to do to pick up those votes in particular, where it could be a bit of a softer target for you guys?
Always a lot of work to do in Lions, a very big seat, 30-odd thousand square kilometres, but there's been massive growth in the south of the seat, so Sorell, Brighton, Derwent Valley, a lot of new suburbs popping up. So there's a lot of work to do in those new suburbs, new people, new families. You know, they all need services, they need access to health, and you're quite right, we did pick up the suburb of Prospect Vale, which is in Meander Valley Council, but they do culturally think of themselves as part of Launceston, so they're in my seat now. And we've been doing a fair bit of work up there as well. But, you know, Emily, it's a huge seat, 12 councils, 12 mayors that I deal with, and we've got a lot of challenges in the seat.
Let's pick up on a couple of the issues, because Labor's position has changed on them, and they're top of mind for some voters in the Lions electorate. One is the Westbury prison, so a second prison for Tasmania being built in the north of the state. Originally Labor was totally opposed to a Westbury prison and then seemed to change its position. Now it's saying we'll build a northern prison, but we don't know where. We've also had the Lake Malbina proposal, which is a proposal to have helicopters fly in through the Wilderness World Heritage Area. Again, it's not quite clear exactly what Labor's policy is on that. Do you think that that's hurt you? And you've had candidates speaking out against the party's position.
No, with the Westbury prison, for example, we've been very consistent. We support a northern prison. It's needed for families to have access to their inmates who are in the prison. But we think the process in selecting Westbury has been entirely wrong. People were taken for granted. They weren't consulted properly. And we can't have faith that this is the right site because the process has been so flawed. And of course now we've got federal implications with it being a site of environmental significance, and the federal Environment Minister, Susan Ley, has not come clean really on how much role she has in whether that prison goes ahead or not. It will be very interesting if the Liberals do form government after tonight, what the future of that site will be, or whether they will try to move it again. We just don't know.
And Rebecca White left the door open to moving, I guess, Ashley Detention Centre from where it is in Deloraine. Again, a big employment getter in your electorate of Lions. Would Labor support a northern prison, say, in Ashley?
Sorry, I missed that, Emily.
Sorry, Brian, I asked whether Labor would support a northern prison on the site of Ashley, for example.
I'm having trouble with the earpiece. Something about Ashley and moving Ashley. I'm sorry, I can't hear you clearly.
It looks like we've got a technical problem there in the seat of Lions. We've got more than 30% of the vote counted now in Bass. Let's check in on the latest results with Anthony.
Look at the party totals. The Liberal Party's on 3.6. We think that will fall slightly with counting to come. And I should point out, because of the Windermere by-election, the Legislative Council election, there's a lot of votes in the northern part of Launceston that haven't come in yet. Mowbray, those sorts of areas are very strong for the Labor Party. So the Labor Party's on 1.46, the Greens on 0.64. So while you'd say on those numbers, Liberals and the Greens will be competing for the last seat, I think those numbers will change around a bit. What is interesting to look at the change in vote that's occurring. Liberal vote up, Labor vote down, others down, and I'm just not convinced that the missing Northern Launceston figures don't change that. But on the leaders, Peter Gutwin is just under three quotas in his own right. Now, again, this has got everything from the northeast of the electorate where he's from. He's from Bridport, Bridport. And he's done really well in that part of the electorate. Michelle O'Byrne is second, Janie Fidland 0.56. Jennifer Houston is way down the list. And we think, unless there's something remarkable in the figures to come, we think she'll be defeated. It's very difficult for her to come from fourth place on that ticket when, you know, your two leading candidates are both under a quota. So I can't see how Jennifer Houston gets re-elected. Jack Davenport on 0.34. Michael Ferguson, it's Michelle O'Byrne, Michael Ferguson and Sarah Courtney will be elected on Peter Gutwin's surplus, as normally happens in Bass. That's that's pretty much close to a record vote for a Member of Parliament. Leaders often get huge votes. I think Will Hodgman's got 2.5 quotas. So if that's 2.5 quotas, that's up there with Robin Gray and Doug Lowe from the past. And so that's the position there. And if we look at, I'll just look at the party totals again, just to clarify that. 3.6. The Liberals have got 3, Labor's got 1, and there's a battle between the three parties for that last seat. And at this stage, I wouldn't pick one of them to be the winner.
A swing of nearly 28% to the Premier Peter Gutwin. And Nick McKim, at the start of the night, you were quite bullish about Jack Davenport's chances. It looks like he's probably going to fall short there.
Oh, I wouldn't necessarily say that, Guy. What I think is that what might help Labor potentially sneak over the line for that 5th seat is that their votes are pretty evenly split between Michelle O'Byrne and Janie Finlay, whereas if there was more of a discrepancy there, as I said earlier, that would have opened the door for us, but certainly not giving that seat away on those numbers.
You think there might be a leak out of the Labor ticket?
Well, if what Anthony's just said, whether there's a leak out of the Labor, there's always some leakage out of tickets. Our voters are generally pretty disciplined and will vote 1 to 5 Green. And then many of them will stop after that because they just can't simply stomach voting for either the Labor or Liberal parties, and good on them. But on those numbers, if some of the big inner city booths, where we'd expect to do better in Bass than some of the smaller, more regional and rural booths, if they haven't yet come in, I think there's still an opportunity for us for a positive swing and to be in the running for that 5th seat.
Julie Collins, it looks almost certain that Jennifer Houston is out of Parliament.
Yes, it'll be a very tough night, I think, for Jennifer. It's very difficult, as I said earlier, for all of those people that lose their seats, but that is the Hare-Clark system, and you can work incredibly hard and you can make a valuable contribution, but it is always hard for those candidates that lose their seat, and it's not looking good for Jennifer at the moment. But I would say, as Anthony hinted, there are a lot of Labor booths yet to come in Bass.
And Anthony, you've got an update for us on Franklin.
Yes, you have to sort of pore through these figures sometimes to work them out. In Franklin, the Liberals are not going to win 3 seats. Their vote has fallen. Without Will Hodgman, they haven't got somebody to pull the vote of the ticket. Labor is just under 2 quotas, and the Greens are over a quota. We've just decided that Rosalie Woodruff will be returned there. We're predicting she'll be 20% or more by the end of the night. If you look at the change in vote that's occurring, the Liberal vote is down. The loss of Will Hodgman has hurt the Liberal Party in that electorate, and the Green vote is up. Let's look at who's elected at the moment. We're saying Jackie Petrusma is elected and Nick Street is possible. I haven't got the rest of them marked, so let's go and have a look at this graphic. It said Jackie Petrusma elected, Rosalie Woodruff has got just under a quota in her own right. And this is interesting, Dean Winter is running second in that electorate, ahead of David O'Byrne. Alison Standen can't get elected from there. I think we might mark her as defeated because unless there's something happens by the time we get to the 50% of the vote. She can't close the gap. There'll be 2 Labor candidates trying to reach a quota, and you can't turn 0.24 into 0.6 and pass someone. Nick Street will be the second elected as a sitting member, and Beck Enders from Huon Valley is doing quite well. Whether that will drop off a bit for her when the Clarence vote comes in, which is on the other side of the Derwent. So we'll see what happens there. But that definitely looks pretty clear to be 2 Labor, 2 Liberal and one Green, which means it's 3-3-3 in the north, 2 in Franklin, 1 more in Clark, Liberals 12. The next time we look at Clark, we'll get a better handle on what the numbers are looking like.
Anthony, thank you very much for that. Those 2 seats, really, it's a tale of the leaders or their impact on them. 3 quotas for Peter Gutwin in Bass, that's quite phenomenal. And without the Will Hodgman factor in Franklin, your reaction to that?
Well, look, it was something I think we had to expect. 2.5 quotas swashing round in the electorate of Franklin without the person who got them there to regain them makes it very difficult for us to catch all of those votes. That's absolutely right. We saw a similar phenomenon when Jim Bacon was not in the election and the subsequent decline in vote. But I'm hopeful, though, as we do proceed to the Eastern Shore, we see some votes come our way. I know that at the Lauderdale booth, the Liberal Party have led with 973 primaries to Labor's 715 and the Greens on 426, I'm told. So hopefully that's a bit of an indication of votes coming to us. In Lyons, though, I think was the other... Bass, rather, the other electorate we were looking at.
3 quotas.
That's right, 3 quotas there, but it's just like we had in Franklin with Will Hodgman, the leader there getting the lion's share of the vote and it trickling down to the other candidates on the ticket.
Yeah.
Julie Collins, Dean Winter leading the Labor ticket in Franklin. The Labor Party didn't even want him as a candidate.
Well, obviously he was on the ticket, and Rebecca White did make sure that
He
Dean
was
was on
not
the
back
ticket.
as a candidate. What does that say about the Labor Party that you didn't want a candidate who ultimately is leading your ticket in Franklin?
Labor is polling quite strongly in Franklin. As I said, some of those booths that we would expect to be Labor still haven't come in yet. So it will be interesting to see when we get big booths in from the Eastern Shore about what that looks like. And I hope that Labor gains, and I'm really pleased that it looks like at least 2 for us in Franklin.
We need to come back to talk also about Dean Winter and Alison Standen. But for the moment, we've got Felix Ellis standing by, I believe, in Braddon. Anthony, let's have a look at the results first before we cross to Felix Ellis.
Well, let's have a look at those overall party totals. The Liberals are above 3. Labor is on 1.5. We've still got Craig Garland doing quite well and ahead of the Greens. So, I mean, it's definite 3 Liberal, 1 Labor, and then it's in doubt who's got the other seat. We're saying Jeremy Rockcliffe is elected. Then it's between Felix Ellis, Roger Jensch and Adam Brooks as to who's next elected on that ticket. And Anita Dow and Shane Broad, if Labor gets 2 seats, they're in the race for those final seats. So we've only got Jeremy Rockcliffe elected. The reason that I would have declared Felix Ellis elected, he's second on the ticket at the moment. My doubt about that is just simply his vote was quite regional last time. As you get the bigger booths from the towns further east, his vote may drop. So, but there's definitely 3 Liberals. And on that last count, the Liberal vote has actually increased since the last time I looked. So a very poor result for both Labor and the Greens in Braddon.
Anthony, can we have a look at the actual quotas for those candidates?
For each candidate? Yeah. Leaders. Jeremy Rockcliffe's got 1.6. Felix Ellis, 0.57. He's got 9.5. Adam Brooks, 0.5. He's on 8.4. Roger Jensch down here is on 0.42. And there's some other Liberal candidates down the bottom here. Unless Roger Jensch does really well I think he's from Devonport. He's from Central Coast anyway. Unless he does really well, he can't catch either Felix Ellis or Adam Brooks. There will be 3 Liberals. It's likely to be Felix Ellis and Adam Brooks. So again, that would be a changeover of sitting member. Justine Key, who was added to the ticket quite late, has not outpolled either of the sitting members. So she hasn't been able to do what Michael Ferguson or Michelle O'Byrne did, which is transfer to State Parliament and take a seat.
We cross now to Felix Ellis in the seat of Braddon. Felix, Anthony hasn't quite called you over the line, but it does look highly likely that you've been re-elected. What's your reaction tonight?
Yeah, look, it's early days, obviously, Guy, but just so pleased and proud to get the support of, even just one vote in this electorate. It's an amazing place, Northwest Coast, West Coast in King Island, and, just really delighted to be where we are today, even though it's obviously early days.
Felix, it's Emily Baker here. You are almost the, and I say this with respect, the ultimate Stephen Bradbury here. We had Adam Brooks resign and Joan Ryler came in. Joan Ryler resigned and then you've come in. And now you've won a gold medal on your own, it seems. Tell me how you did that. Talk me through your campaign.
Oh, look, as I say, Emily, it's obviously early days, but, one of the things that I've really prided myself on is my work ethic, from back in the days when I was a plumber. As soon as I came into Parliament, I said that, I wanted to work flat out for the people of the Northwest, the West Coast and King Island. And hopefully that's paying dividends. But as I say, early days. The Tasmanian people will have their say.
Felix, I know that you were once a plumber, but let's acknowledge that you were also once a political staffer. You worked for Senator Richard Colbeck. You're clearly politically ambitious. What have you got your eye on going forward?
Member for Braddon. It's the most amazing job you could ever ask for. I've been doing it for about 8 months, and I'm just really pleased with the support that we've got. We're even looking like another 4 years in there. Would be the great honour of my life, and just really delighted to see that we've had the support that we have so far.
And talk me through the performance of your colleagues in Braddon. So we've got Roger Yench, who's not got great numbers at this point, and Adam Brooks, who's nowhere near as popular as he once was. What accounts for that?
Look, I'm not sure, Emily. I'm not a commentator, but certainly one of the things that we're really fighting for at the moment is to make sure that we secure a majority Gutman Liberal government, and I'm really optimistic that my colleagues will be able to help us deliver 3 seats in Braddon at least, and if we continue the hard work that we've done over the last 3 years, that we'll be able to get a strong, stable majority government, whatever that order looks like.
And if you don't get a strong, stable majority government, Felix Ellis, what do you think happens next?
Look, that's for people probably more experienced than me, but like as I say, the Tasmanian people will have their say on what that result is. It's early days. Obviously, there's still plenty of counting to come. I'm optimistic, but at the end of the day, that will be up to the voters to decide.
And back to your colleagues in Braddon, you're a family man yourself. You've just welcomed a newborn baby, and congratulations again for that. I want to talk about Adam Brooks. What do you make of what's been revealed over the past 48 hours?
Yeah, look, Emily, I'm not a commentator, but, obviously I'm focused on running my own race and making sure that we get a stable majority Gutman Liberal government. As you say, it's been an interesting campaign for me. I've campaigned out of the maternity hospital for the better part of a week, and haven't got a lot of sleep over the last couple of weeks, I have to admit, but we're just really proud to be able to make a contribution to this community as a family.
Felix, you do look tired, so I hope you can get some rest tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
From the northern edge of Greater Hobart all the way to the southern fringes of Launceston, this is Lyons, the largest electorate in Tasmania. Jointly named after the only Tasmanian to ever serve as Prime Minister, Joseph Lyons, and his wife Enid, the first woman elected to the Federal House of Representatives. This is Tasmania Votes. We're at the Tally Room at the Hotel Grand Chancellor in Hobart. I'm Sabra Lane.
And I'm Guy Stainer. Well, Felix Ellis might not be a commentator, but one man who is Anthony Green with the latest on Clark.
Well, Clark is determining the fate of this election. The Liberal Party is currently on 29%, 1.75 quotas. Look at the whole numbers here. The Greens have got 1.57, Labor 1.15. So there's 3 seats decided on the quotas there. There is then 0.75 for the Liberals, 0.57 for the Greens, 0.6 for Christy Johnson, 0.58 for Sue Hickey. Our projection is the Liberal vote will increase 2 or 3%. from this point. I believe the Green vote will dip from this point based on where the polling places are from. Now, the fact that Hickey and Johnston are in the contest makes our predictive figures a little bit more ropey, but there's no shift in the Labor Party vote. They stay roughly where they are. So I think a lot of this change here is coming down to having come from the Labor Party, and I think those effects are cancelling themselves out. And there seems to be a bit of a swap between the Liberals and Greens depending on where the polling places are from. So we're correcting from that. It's a complex explanation, I'm sorry. The change in vote, Liberals are down 5%, but that still puts them, and I think that puts them towards 2 quotas. This is a corrected swing. Labor's down 22, the Independents up 20, and the members, they're the sitting members, sorry, the leaders. Cassie O'Connor's easily elected. She'll probably be the only one with a quota. Elise Archer will be elected when the preferences fold up through the ticket, as will Ella Haddad, which is then going to leave, just to go back to the party totals, as I said, we got 0.7, 0.8 of a quota there with a Liberal. As I said, I think that number will come down, and then you'll have 0.6, 0.58. The Green preferences and the Labor Party preferences are both likely to help the Independents. But I'm still not convinced that you can get 2 Independents ahead of a second Liberal. So with 3 seats decided, the most likely result on the numbers we're seeing at the moment is the Liberals will reach that second seat and one of the Independents will be elected. Now, if that scenario comes off, the Liberals have got majority government, but we've only got 30% counted. We'd want to see more counting. But my projection is the Liberal vote will increase from here. If that flows through for the rest of the counting tonight, we may have a firmer handle on who's won this election and whether it's majority government.
Nick McKim, we've seen an election campaign where the minor parties and the independents have been repeatedly demonised. The major parties saying that they would only govern in majority. Looking at Clark, we've seen significant votes for independent candidates and a swing towards the Greens. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction to that, and by the way, congratulations to Cassie O'Connor. Looks like she'll top the poll, and that's a really outstanding result. And Rosalie Woodruff obviously elected in Franklin, so congratulations to Rose as well. But people are sick of being lectured to by major party leaders who are basically saying to voters, if we don't get the results that we want, we're going to throw the toys out of the cot and storm off into the never-never. This is serious business, politics, and people expect everyone who is elected to Parliament, and particularly the leaders of parties, to respect the will of the voters. And when you're saying to the voters, we're not going to respect what you say, we're going to spit the dummy and storm off into the night if we don't get the result we want and potentially throw Tasmania back into another election. I think that's backfired badly, and it continues a national trend where the major parties are election on election losing votes because they are taking votes and voters for granted, and they are saying things to the voters which are quite frankly disrespectful.
All right, we're going to go to Anna Fronberg now, our reporter who's at the Greens headquarters. Anna, what's happening there?
Yeah, good party, I reckon.
Good evening. Well, excitement is really building here at the Greens function in Hobart. We've just had a huge round of applause and lots of hugs when Anthony Green announced that Rosalie Woodruff would be returned to her seat in Franklin and that Cassie O'Connor would also be returned in Clark, as you can hear. As you can hear, there's already quite a bit of celebrating going on, and quite a lot of celebrating going on. A short time ago, we had the Greens leader, Cassie O'Connor, take to the stage and address her supporters, and she opened by saying that the swing is on. So the Greens are feeling really confident, not just of their results so far in Clark and Franklin, but Cassie O'Connor believes the party's a real chance in Bass and Lyons as well. The Greens are obviously thrilled about this given their last election result back in 2018 when they were reduced to just 2 seats. Cassie O'Connor feels that they've done really well in terms of campaigning on social issues like addressing the housing crisis and poverty here in Tasmania. So she's feeling quite optimistic about the result, and I guess fair to say that there's a real celebration unfolding and it's likely to continue.
All right, Anna, thank you very much for that.
Sabra, can I just jump in? I'm not surprised to hear such cheers for Anna Fromberg there. She's incredibly popular in the ABC newsroom as well.
All right, John O'Dunningham, to you, how do you explain the Greens vote being up the way it is?
Well, I think and it's unusual for me to commentate on the results of another party in positive terms, but they are two candidates, particularly in the south. Let's focus there with Cassie O'Connor, who has been a Member of Parliament for an extended period of time, and Rosalie Woodruff, who has worked, as I understand it, quite hard for the duration of her term. This is what voters do. They respond to candidates and members that way. They reward them with a vote. So I expect that's what it comes down to here, and we'll see this across all of the parties. Candidates that work hard will be returned to Parliament.
And the point that Nick McKim made earlier about people don't like to be lectured to, that, you know, the toys are out of the cot if you don't give us what we want?
Well, I think it's incumbent upon every leader to ask for a majority. That is what each major party is saying they need to make sure this state runs smoothly, effectively, particularly as we emerge from COVID. And on that basis, I think it's not disingenuous to say we would like to govern in majority. That is the best thing we can do for this state. That is what our our platform is based upon. And so it's not lecturing voters, it's saying if you want what we are offering you, and here is our list of promises to you, this is what we plan to do, this is how we achieve it through majority government.
It's time now to cross to the floor of the tally room with Leon Compton, who's with a familiar face around Hobart, one of the many independent candidates for Clark.
Indeed, Guy, one of the many independent candidates, and across Tasmania, one of the enormous number of local government representatives who are putting their hand up for parliamentary office this time around. Mike Dutta has run as an independent. As I look up onto the board just behind us from the tally room, Mike has 361 primary votes. Mike Dutta, I know you put in an enormous amount of work on the doors. How do you feel looking at those figures come in for your, well, obviously clearly non-chances this evening?
Yeah, no, I find that not too disappointing, considering the fact that, you know, we are fighting against the three very strong major political parties, the Greens, the Labour and the Liberal. And so as an independent, you know, you don't really stand a very good chance. However,
so why did you decide to run, Mike?
Yeah, there are a number of reasons. Firstly, I think diversity is what is lacking in our state parliament. If you look at it, you know, I don't think we have had any person of Aboriginal background in there.
So we have one Aboriginal woman currently, Ms Houston, who is looks like unfortunately she'll be making her way out of Parliament for the Labor Party. That's in the electorate of Bass. And we've had one Aboriginal member previously a decade or two ago, but that is it for the moment.
That's true. And so if you look at the landscape of Tasmania, and especially Hobart, you know, there's quite a change with regards to the Indians, the Nepalese, the Chinese, and different races coming in. And I think we need a voice, you know, at the state level, which we don't have. The other reason why I decided to run was to give, hopefully my preferences will go to the two leading independent candidates, that's Christy Johnson and Sue Hickey. And thirdly, you know, I was very, very strongly opposed with the idea when they were not in any way happy to let us know about the donation legislation. They dropped it, as it were, and also my disappointment with Labour that they were not going to stand as they did in 2018 with regard to the pokies. And so that was, you know, another reason for me to come up and say I'm going to fight this.
For people who are just tuning into our coverage this evening, Tasmania has the weakest political donation laws in the country. The government promised to address those prior to going to a poll, but here we are, it's May the 1st, and no legislation improving political donation transparency has passed through the House. So, Mike, as you look up on the board immediately, sort of over our camera's head this evening, what are you seeing unfold? Are you still hopeful that one of Christy Johnson or Sue Hickey will get elected?
That is my hope, and I hope that will eventuate. You know, and I'm very confident that one of them will get in. And if there is a balance of power where the two the major parties are not holding on to power, that will be quite an achievement. You know, it is very much like in the political arena, the Coles and Woolworths these are the two major parties who maintain and have power. And I think that really needs to change. If that particular paradigm shifts, I think there will be a lot more happening for the people of Tasmania.
Mike Dutta, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Leon. I'm not sure paradigm shift is on the buzzword bingo card tonight, but if it is, you've got another shot in the can. We've got nearly half the votes counted. Let's go to Anthony with the latest on Bass.
Yes, and continue to see the Liberal Party vote very strong, just under 60%. Labor on 1.5, the Greens on 0.62. Now, say that is the final figure. The Liberals can't reach 4 because one of Labor or the Greens will help the other get elected. So it's a battle, I think, between the second Labor candidate and the Green. And as we've mentioned a couple of times, there's a lot of vote from North Launceston, which is strong for Labor, which is yet to come in. If we look at the leading candidates, Peter Gutwin's got 2.87 quotas. He's got nearly half the vote in the electorate. As we should say, I think I sort of pointed out in my notes, there hasn't been a Premier, he's only the 4th Premier from Bass, and there hasn't been a Premier from Bass re-elected since 1913. So I don't know why you get so few Premiers for Bass, but there's one now, and he's likely to be there again after the election. Michelle O'Byrne on 0.61, Janie Finlay 0.55, and Jennifer Houston is well down, so Jennifer Houston will be defeated. Michael Ferguson and Sarah Courtney will be re-elected. Jack Davenport is in there competing with whoever's second on the Labor ticket for that final seat. But as I said, I've got the suspicion Labor might be slightly favoured there, but there's more counting to come through the rest of the evening.
Well, that was pretty interesting. John O'Donoghue, 50% in nearly his own right, the Premier, but Anthony's saying it's probably unlikely 4 seats there for the Liberals.
Yeah, I think, as we said at the beginning of the night, it's a tall order to be able to pick up that 4th seat. Only once have we done it. That was in Braddon since 1998. Peter is incredibly popular. I have been out on the doors in Bass and I know how people have responded. In fact, right across the state, I wonder how many people in Clark and Franklin were looking for Peter Gutman on their ballot paper, perhaps, instead of other Liberal candidates. But
perhaps Michael Ferguson and Minister Courtney might be thinking about tattoos of Peter Gutman on their arms instead.
Perhaps that might be a new campaign tactic next time round. But that said, the vote we've just seen, as described by Anthony, does bring us to that 3-seat mark, which is what we were hoping for there, what we were predicting. 4th would have been great, but as I say, a tall order. Just back to Clark, though, I might say one of the things that was canvassed before, that possibility of our party, the Libs, picking up second seat there. 2010, we had 29.8% of the primary vote and picked up 2 votes, so we're not far off that now. So hopefully that does mean it translates into a second seat, and perhaps that 13th seat we need to have majority government, referencing our earlier conversations, by the end of the night.
All right.
I have a question for Julie Collins. We haven't seen Labor's vote shift much in Bass for a long time, and it has been a Labor stronghold in the past, particularly when we think about the northern suburbs of Launceston. Why is that?
Well, I think you've got the Premier, who's quite popular, as has been stated, with Peter Gutwin there, so I think it is difficult. You've got 3 very strong Liberal candidates that you've had for the last couple of elections. I think the Labor ticket being stronger this time has shown that we're doing better in Bass than we did last time, and certainly also what we've seen during this election campaign is no sign of the Prime Minister, who is expected to come down, and I think that might be because he's a bit on the nose in Bass, and certainly we're picking up from the people in Bass that they're unhappy with the federal government, but they do like Peter Gutwin.
We're not talking about Peter Gutwin, Scott Morrison right now. We're talking about Labor's vote. How do you see Labor's vote increasing in Bass? What are you doing to appeal to voters in Bass?
Well, we're obviously talking about issues that matter to them, issues like health, issues like housing affordability, social housing, the waiting lists at the hospital. I mean, when you've got 1 in 8 Tasmanians on some form of health waiting list, you've got a really serious issue, and that is impacting the people of Bass. But clearly we've got more work to do in Bass, and we accept that.
Do the major parties need to reassess how they approach these campaigns? We all know that with Hare Clark, minority government is a very real possibility. the leaders need to just stump up and say, I'm going to deal with what the result is, rather than threaten to take their bat and ball and go home if they don't get the result they want.
Well, clearly leaders campaign for majority government, as we have said, but Peter Gutwin
the
is the one who
is
said that he would resign
if he
didn't get majority government. Rebecca has said clearly that she is campaigning for majority government. Clearly that's not where Labor is at the moment, and clearly, you know, it's a tough night, and we're doing pretty well, I think, to hold our own after what we've seen in other states and territories since COVID.
There were quite a few, though, federal front benches that did fly into Bass and Braddon to try and shore up Labor's vote. Anthony Albanese, Tanya Plibersek, Penny Wong. That doesn't seem to have been able to bolster your vote up there in any way.
Well, I think we're doing a little bit better than we did last time in Bass, and I think that is because we've had a lot of federal support, but also because we've had a stronger ticket. You know, our candidates have been campaigning very hard in Bass. They've knocked on a lot of doors, and they're talking to people about issues like health that really matter to people, but clearly we have more work to do.
All right. Thank you, Julie. Anthony, you've got us... Run us through your update.
Let me look at my order queue. I was just going to do... Just to do this overall summary of the election at the moment. Again, the primary vote, there's a slight drop in the Liberal vote since the last election. The Labor vote, they've got a change in votes, usually more useful. Labor down slightly. Labor down 4%, most of that due to their dreadful result in Clark. The Green vote up. They've done particularly well in Franklin and Clark in particular. What I want to do is the chamber, because if you show the seats which are won, we have the Liberal Party on a definite 12. They have got 3 seats in Bass, Braddon lines. They've got 2 in Franklin and they've got 1 in Clark. Labor's 5 and Greens 2. The Liberals have a definite 12. They can still win the extra seat in Clark, which gets them to 13. If they don't win the extra seat at Clark, an independent will win. Peter Gutwin can continue as Premier of Tasmania if he chooses, because he's either going to be in majority or 1 seat short of a majority with an independent. So it's then up to him, if he finishes in that situation, it's up to him whether he wants to be Premier or not, because Christy Johnson or Sue Hickey may be in the chamber, and that's an extra vote. He could govern with them without having to rely on the Greens. So it's a matter, as far as I can see, it's a matter of whether Peter Gutwin wants to remain as Premier if he falls 1 seat short.
Anthony, if the Liberals remain on 12 and don't form a majority, does that mean that both of the independents in Clark, Sue Hickey and Christy Johnson, need to be elected?
That's the part. Yeah, there is a Liberal, a Labor, and a Green candidate, and a candidate elected in Clark. There's a strong chance the Liberals could get a seat. If they don't get out, it would be both independents. You're quite correct, and I think that's very difficult to achieve. There's an outside possibility the Greens could do well. You've done the maths quite well, actually, because I think that's the solution of what's going on here. The Liberals have a definite 12. There is a strong possibility that they are going to get 13. The only reason they wouldn't reach 13 is if 2 independents get elected. And I think it's very difficult for 2 independents to get elected. But if the vote for the Liberals does drop, they're competing with 2 independents. But I think the Liberal vote will increase. So I think they are going to either have 12 with independents on the balance of power or 13 for the Liberal Party, in which case, if they do fall short, it's up to Peter Gutwin whether he stays Premier.
Will we know tonight?
Look, we may. There's more counting to come. I think the result in Clark will firm up with further counting. It's the one that's most in doubt. But look, there is only one possible government after this election, and then if Peter Gutwin chooses to lead, stay on as Premier, even if he falls 1 seat short, that's his choice.
There's a lot to unpick here for especially Liberal and Labor representatives on the panel. We'll go to you first, Jonathan Dunham. If you're stuck on 12, you've got a former Liberal member who's in the previous Parliament as one of the independents. Would you reach out to Sue Hickey and form government?
Well, Premier Gutwin has been absolutely clear about his intentions should we not reach majority. I remain confident we will. As I mentioned before, in 2010 we picked up that 2nd seat with 29.8% of the primary vote. We're not far off that right now. Anthony has said he expects our vote to increase. So my hope and almost my expectation is that we will pick up that 13th seat, and that becomes sort of a moot point. But and who knows which of the independents then gets elected if there is only one.
You say that you're confident. Are you getting information that gives you that confidence, or it's just hope?
No, there is bits and pieces of information that I'm yet to validate and verify from various booths about the strength of the votes of a number of candidates across Clark, but also the vote patterns of the independents as well, and where they are heading to as best can be deciphered with these Robson rotation ballot papers. But I remain of the view that we should make it to 13 tonight, and we will have, or hopefully tonight, a majority government.
And if we are in a hung parliament situation, we would not necessarily be looking at a change of government, but we would almost definitely be looking at a change of premier.
I think given the commitments made by the Premier, that's certainly a conversation that would have to be had if that were the case. I remain of the view that we will be in majority government once this election is the polls declared.
Julie Collins, over to you now. The flip side of that question is, if the Liberal Party remains on 12 seats, is there any way that Labor could cobble together a coalition of Greens and Independents to form a government?
Well, first of all, as Senator Duniam has indicated, the Premier has said if that's the case, he'll resign. The other thing, of course, is we've still got one of the Liberal candidates, Adam Brooks, possibly under a cloud, and whether or not the Premier accepts his vote or not is another matter, or whether he resigns depending on what happens with him. So I think there's still a lot yet to go, and we're still early counting in Clark at 35%, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
And the same question has to be asked, therefore, of Rebecca White, who said that she wouldn't lead a minority government. But if you can cobble together some form of coalition, would Rebecca White remain the leader?
Well, I think that's a big hypothetical at this stage, and certainly the campaign has been for majority government, and we've worked really hard, and Rebecca White has been a terrific leader.
But majority government is not going to happen. So the best that you can hope for at the moment, based on Anthony's figures, is to form some kind of coalition with the Greens
we'll govern
and
in majority.
Independents.
Rebecca has been clear that we'll govern in majority.
So it's a handball back to the Libs.
Well, the governor will go to the Liberals first if they have the majority of seats, and then they will have to turn it down, or that is the way the Constitution works.
That answer sounds like you would rather the Liberals form a government with the assistance of an independent rather than Labor form a government itself.
No, it would be the reality of the constitutional situation. The party with the most seats is the one the governor would go to first, and that is the reality of what would happen if that were the case. But obviously we don't know who the Premier might be because Peter Gutwein would allegedly have resigned. So it would be interesting. And then there's the Adam Brooks vote and what happens in Braddon with him as these investigations are underway.
Let's talk about Clark. You've lost Scott Bacon, obviously. You don't have that Bacon name behind you. What has happened there? You had obviously a huge candidate scandal with Ben McGregor, the Labor Party president, resigning over inappropriate text messages. Why have you got such a ticket of, I guess, unknowns in the community in that seat, which is crucial to Labor?
Well, they're very strong candidates in the seat of Clark. I would say just because somebody doesn't have a name doesn't mean that they haven't worked hard and are not a good candidate. And we do see some, interesting people come into the parliament that bring diversity to the place when you have those candidates that work hard that don't have a name. Obviously, names also help, given that it is Herr Clark and there is name recognition. Clearly, we are suffering from the loss of the name Bacon, as we have in the past, but we're also losing votes clearly to the Mayor of Glenorchy. And, Sue Hickey, of course, and both Christy Johnson have had a lot of media coverage as independents, and clearly they've benefited from that.
And you could hardly blink watching commercial television without seeing an ad for Simon Davis. Would we have expected a stronger vote for him?
Well, obviously, he's campaigned hard and he's a terrific candidate, as I said. I'm not giving up hope that we might be able to somehow get there in Clark, to be honest, because some of those booths yet to come are the strong Labor booths that are being counted second from the Legislative Council, but clearly it's difficult from here. Interestingly, with the preferences from our scrutineers, I understand that Sue Hickey's preferences, about 60% are going to Christy Johnson, and Christy Johnson's preferences we seem to be getting the majority of. So that will be an interesting race depending on how those preference flows go.
All right, we're going to go to Elise Archer, the Attorney-General, who is at the Grand Chancellor at the Liberal Party headquarters party happening down the hall here. But first we're going to go to Anthony Green for an update on Clark.
The Liberals' vote has risen since I last looked, and they're on 1.83 quotas. The Greens on 1.52. Labor's still just over 1.1. Christy Johnson on 0.6, Sue Hickey 0.58. In terms of Christy Johnson's preferences flowing to Labor, the problem is that if you look at the leading candidates, Elise Archer, Ella Haddad has got most of that ticket. Christy Johnson will be ahead of all the other Labor candidates. I think there's a difficulty from them being there long enough to get preferences. I think the issue is, I've just looked at the party totals again. It's one Liberal, one Green, one Labor. There's enough vote between the two for an independent. I do think the Green vote will drop from there, and there may be some leakage out of when Cassie O'Connor has her surplus distributed. The question is still whether this goes up any further. If the Liberals get towards two quotas there, with exhaustion from other candidates, anything above 0.8 gives them a really strong chance of getting a second seat. Elise Archer will stay in the count for a long time. So it's looking much better. It continues to look better for the Liberal Party there. So it's an interesting contest in Clark. Elise Archer, just to, because you're about to cross to her, she's got 0.83 of a quota in her own right. So she's running second on terms of first preferences. Cassie O'Connor will be elected on the first count, and then they'll start to cut up the other candidates.
Thanks, Anthony. Elise Archer, congratulations. How confident are you that you're going to be able to get a second Liberal up in Clark?
Well, Sabra, if my memory serves me correctly, last time we were at a similar point as well and we got 2 seats. So, look, fairly confident, but one thing is for sure, that Clark is an interesting electorate. It's always been an interesting contest. We've always had independents run as well, and there's, of course, always a strong Green vote. So I think that 5th seat will be very hard fought.
Elise, it's Emily Baker here. You put your hand up to be a potential Deputy Premier in January 2020. If Peter Gutwein resigns, as he's promised to do, if a hung parliament is returned, are you having an eye on leadership again?
Look, I'm not going to talk about majority-minority government. We're fairly confident at this stage. It's looking quite good for majority, and that's what we're focused on still tonight, and we'll see what the outcome is. But as the Premier said the other day, we will rule in majority or not at all.
Well, with respect, I'm not sure it's fair to say you're now not going to talk about majority-minority. We've been talking about it for 2 weeks at the discretion of both party leaders. If there is a minority government elected tonight, what will the Liberal Party do? You are a senior member of the Liberal leadership team. What is the Liberal Party's plan?
Well, as I said, Emily, I'm not going to speculate at this early stage in the night. We don't even know how many seats we've got in each electorate, but it's looking really strong. I know that there's the predictions already at 12, and in most electorates we're only in the 30 percentile of votes counted. It's far too early to be talking and speculating about anything, but we have campaigned very strongly, very hard on majority government, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank Tasmanians for their continued support, particularly last year during a very difficult year. And while I was out in my electorate, a lot of people were talking about how strong that leadership has been, and so I'm hopeful that that will be rewarded.
Looking back at the last term of Parliament, and even before that, there was no love lost between you and Sue Hickey, who's now running as an independent candidate. Any regrets there in how that relationship played out?
Emily, I have always been focused on the people of Tasmania, indeed the people in my electorate. I haven't been focused on anything other than doing my job. I'm dedicated to my role as a minister, as has been seen in our response to institutional child sexual abuse. That's been my strong focus, and as far as I'm concerned, that's been my only focus in the last term.
Okay, thank you, Elise Archer.
We're up to the pre-polls in Franklin.
You're watching Tasmania Votes live from the tally room here in Hobart. It's 5 to 9 with 52% of the vote counted. And if you see behind me here, the ballroom here at the Grand Chancellor is slowly filling up as spectators and some of the party faithful come in here to watch the count as it progresses throughout the evening. We're live across ABC TV in Tasmania and on the news channel nationally. And welcome to listeners tuning in on ABC News Radio, local radio in Tasmania, and on the ABC Listen app. I'm Sabra Lane.
And I'm Guy Stainer. Let's get an update on the count with Anthony Green.
Well, let's just do the vote first. A couple of points here to make here. Liberals are on 48.6. Labor's on 28.5, so that's just gone up since I last looked. Labor got 27.3 when they lost office in 2014, so they're only 1% up on their worst ever result at the moment. So they have gone backwards. The Greens are on 13%, which is again also roughly a little bit down on what they got in 2014. The Green vote has become much more concentrated in the south of the state, doing much worse in the north of the state. If you look at the change in vote that's occurring, the Liberal vote down slightly, Labor's down vote 4%. Most of that the result of their figures in Clark. The Green vote up, some vote for others there. Let's look at the chamber. We have got the Liberal Party on a definite 12 seats, Labor 5, Greens 2. We believe when we add in some more seats leaning that way, it's 12, 8 for Labor, 2 Greens. Now, Liberals are on 12. As I was saying that logic a few minutes ago, either they're going to win the extra seat in Clark or there is going to be an independent holding the balance of power. So after this election, there is going to be a Liberal government, whether it's Peter Gutwin leading it and whether it's a Liberal government in majority or minority, but there's no other government in that chamber. If Liberals have 12, the only alternative government would be a Labor-led government with Greens and independents in support. And when whoever wins this election eventually, if the Liberals end up on 12 and the Premier goes to the Governor and advises someone else be appointed Premier, he either accepts it himself or he passes it to another Liberal. But if Peter Gutwin goes to the Governor with those sorts of numbers and suggests Rebecca White be sworn in with such a divided crossbench, the Governor's not going to accept that advice. It's exactly the same position that David Bartlett was in. So as far as I can see, there is going to be a Liberal government. It's a question of whether it gets another seat and is a majority, and if it doesn't get the extra seat, whether Peter Gutwin leads it or not.
Anthony, is there any possibility that Adam Brooks in Braddon holds the 13th seat?
We'll have a look at the figures in Braddon because they're bouncing around a bit. I'll look at the leaders and then just look at the Liberal ticket. They've got 3 point something or other quotas. Jeremy Rockcliffe has 1.58 quotas, Felix Ellis 0.57, Adam Brooks vote well down from last time. He was just under a quota last time. Roger Yench on 0.41. Which of those gets elected is going to depend on the 0.6 of a quota there with Jeremy Rockcliffe when his surplus goes out. Is his surplus going to favour the 2 current sitting members, or is Adam Brooks going to get a good boost? I think the problem with Roger Yench at the moment is like there's 1.7% gap there. That's a big gap to hope to fill based on Jeremy Rockcliffe's surplus. But he may well have to rely on Adam Brooks. But I do think that, I think Adam Brooks is more likely to win that seat. A bit more counting to come. But yeah, at this stage, he's reliant on Adam Brooks.
Jonathan Dunningham, would you expect that the majority of Jeremy Rockcliffe's surplus would go to Roger Yench?
Look, that's a very good question. It depends on where those who've preferenced Jeremy Rockcliffe come from along the coast. I think, as Anthony has mentioned, it's, Tasmania is a parochial place, so is the northwest coast, and if your candidate's from up the far northwest, chances are you're going to vote for them as opposed to someone else in the Liberal column. So it's hard to say at this stage, but perhaps Roger, having been an incumbent, he may well receive more of the preferences flowing from any distributed votes from Jeremy Rockcliffe over Adam Brooks. That is a possibility.
And are you hopeful of that result?
I'm hopeful that we elect 3 very good Liberals in Braddon and that we can make sure that we provide that stability we were promising Tasmanians would provide when the poll is declared.
And who are the 3 very good Liberals in your view?
Well, there's a range of good Liberals there to choose from, and the voters have cast their votes, and they've decided, as their electors up there, who they would like to see. At the moment, it appears we have Jeremy Rockcliffe and Felix Ellis, 2 very good Liberals. And then, of course, we have Adam Brooks, Roger Yench, Lara Hendricks and Stacey Sheehan to choose from. I think Anthony has outlined that perhaps Adam Brooks has got the leading edge there. But it does come down to, I think, that question around whether Jeremy's preferences do flow to the other incumbent, being Roger Yench, or whether Adam Brooks can continue to garner the votes he needs to get in.
It's a handy line that you've been using, you being the Liberal Party, over the past few days, that it's really up to the voters at the end of the day. But these are the candidates that you've put forward as people you endorse, that Peter Gutwin endorses as the best people to represent his party and his values. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, look, at the point in time when an endorsement occurs for all of our candidates, that is exactly right. We make an assessment based on the information that's available to us at that point in time and endorse candidates for election and take them forward, as we've seen throughout this campaign. We did reference earlier on the issues that have come to light in recent days. That's information that wasn't available at the time of endorsement. Without reflecting on it any further, but those matters are yet to be dealt with in the investigative sense, so we'll see what happens through that process.
And we've heard that Adam Brooks won't be speaking tonight. Do you think more broadly, given you lost the candidate Dean Ewington in Franklin, that the Liberal Party needs to beef up its pre-selection processes?
Look, there's always going to be a need for us to make sure we have the most robust process possible.
Sorry, Senator, but in 2019 we saw the same issue. In one way, we saw a candidate have to resign from the federal election because of some social media posts. At the same time, you said, well, the party said the same thing, that there will always be issues, but we'll be looking at this. When will that actually happen?
Look, I mean, I'd love to, in a utopian world, find an exhaustive way of making sure that every possible issue that could be raised in an election campaign is found out by the party beforehand. Sometimes, depending on someone's judgment, we don't know whether they've provided information around something. They might deem it okay, but others may not. I mean, this is a subjective thing sometimes, so finding an exhaustive process is very difficult. The other point I might add, 2021, candidates had about 24 hours to put their application forms in and be endorsed, in effect. So once nominations were opened by the party and then ratified by our state executive, so we did the best we could in the time we had with the information available to us.
You did set the timeline, but anyway.
We have the Mayor of Kingborough, Dean Winter, standing by to talk to us at the Grand Chancellor. Of course, he's a Labor candidate for the seat of Franklin. Anthony, let's check out how he's gone.
The Liberal Party's on 2.45 quotas without Will Hodgman there. I mean, remember, this is the first time they haven't had a Hodgman on the ticket in Franklin since 1986. So long history of Hodgmans in that seat. So the Liberals got 2.45. Labor, 2 quotas. The Greens, 1.18. And that change in vote is all due to the loss of Liberal support. And a significant amount of that has gone to the Greens. The leading candidates, Jackie Petrus was elected. Rosalie Woodruff will get over the quota when the other Green candidates are removed. David Byrne and Dean Winter are the 2 elected Labor members. Alison Standen is way behind. I think the total of the other candidates is only about the same level as David O'Byrne and Dean Winter. So Dean Winter has been elected. Is at the moment 0.1% behind David O'Byrne on the first preference vote. So Dean Winter's elected and Nick Street will be the second elected Liberal. So I think the 5 elected MPs there are pretty clear.
Dean Winter, you have had a path to Parliament unlike almost any other. You've almost topped the ticket in Franklin. Congratulations, you've been elected. What's your reaction?
Oh, look, thanks very much. Thanks for that. Obviously, it's bittersweet because I was really hoping to contribute to Labor getting 3 seats in Franklin, and listening to Anthony Green's analysis there, does sound like that's not going to happen tonight. So, look, the plan was for me to run and trying to build the Labor vote up to 3, and it's disappointing for Labor that we haven't been able to do that.
Dean Winter, it's Emily Baker here. People watching at home might wonder why a person who was knocked back by a party that they said they believed in persisted. Tell me why you wanted to join a party that didn't want you.
Because I love the Labor Party. I've been a member of the Labor Party for 15 years. I've worked for the Labor Party. I've volunteered for the Labor Party. I'd signed up as a volunteer for another candidate when I wasn't pre-selected. I passionately believe that the Labor Party is the best party for Tasmania, the best party delivers the best results for the state. That's why I am a member, and I'll always be a member of the party.
You seem ambitious. You've been backed by Paul Lennon, a former Tasmanian Premier, by David Bartlett, a former Tasmanian Premier. Tell me what your ambitions are. Do you consider yourself a future Premier as you were described by David Bartlett?
My only ambition is to be a good member for Franklin. if I'm elected, then that will be, a huge honour, and to follow people like Paul Lennon, Lara Giddings, Paula Reid. They're people that I've respected and grown up in a lot of ways. I first joined the Labor Party when Paul Lennon was Premier, and he was probably the inspiration behind me joining, and he was my local member, and I've got to work with Paula Reid in the last 7 years as Kingborough councillor, and so I've got a lot of respect for those people, and I just want to try and follow in their footsteps and represent my community really strongly, and hopefully generate people's respect for the work that I do.
Well, it looks like you have been elected, and that's happened despite what the dominant faction in your party wanted. What happens next week when the dust settles within the Labor Party?
Look, I'm not particularly active internally in that sort of way. I've been a mayor for the past nearly 3 years, and in local government for 7, and I don't get very involved in internal party politics. But the good thing is that we have good, strong people within the party that I'm sure will ensure that the Labor Party is united going forward. And I think that's what's really important. Tasmania needs a battle of ideas at every election. We need 2 strong parties that are ready to battle out for what's best for Tasmania. And listening to people as I door knock for the past 3 weeks, I mean, it was just tragic, some of the stories that we're hearing from people, particularly about health. Healthcare was just such a critical issue, and I'm absolutely sure that it is the critical issue. What we needed to do, though, was to convince people that Labor had the right plan for health going forward, and I think we did as best we could in a very short period of time to do that. But then I think if it is in opposition, then over the next 4 years, Labor's job will be to convince people that we have the right plan and that we can take Tasmania forward.
Dean Winter at Sabra Lane here. If I could, you're sounding a little flat tonight. We are giving it to you that you have been elected to this seat. Given the fight that you had to make to actually be on the ticket, where a federal election is probably 12 months away, you'd probably hope that this wouldn't happen again to any federal candidates. What needs to change within the Labor Party to make sure that good candidates aren't stymied?
Well, we need to be a strong and united party. We need to come together. We can't be anything other than that if we're going to be successful. The only way that the Labor Party will be successful is if we're a strong and united party, and we have to be strong and united behind our leaders, particularly Rebecca White, who I think has done an absolutely amazing job during this campaign in bringing people together, bringing her team together and giving us the best chance. I think that's what all of us members of the party have to do, is to lock in behind the leadership of the party and ensure that we are in the best possible position to fight future elections, be that federal or state.
And if it looks like the Liberals are going to hang on tonight, maybe a majority in their own right, maybe relying on an independent, in those circumstances, should Rebecca White hang on as leader?
I think Rebecca White is an unbelievable leader, and I've been friends with Rebecca for over 10 years, so yeah, you couldn't find a bigger supporter of Rebecca than me. I have just a huge amount of respect for her, and I expect that she'll be the leader going forward.
Dean Winter, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks very much.
This is Tasmania Votes, live from the tally room in Hobart. It's nearly 9:10 with 55% of the vote counted. Hello, I'm Guy Stainer.
And I'm Sabra Lane. Let's get the lay of the land with Anthony.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about people in this cross, because often we talk about the party votes all the time. And in fact, of course, the hair clerk is a very personal electoral system. So we're just going to run through who's elected and defeated in each seat. Michael Ferguson, Peter Gutwin and Sarah Courtney are all elected in Bass. On the Labor ticket, Jennifer Houston has been elected. We think, and of these 3 candidates, Janie Finlay Michelle O'Byrne and Jack Davenport are competing for 2 seats. We think the 2 Labor candidates, Janie Finlay and Michelle O'Byrne, are advantaged. Labor's only got 1.5 quotas, but both of those candidates have more votes themselves than the entire Green ticket, which makes it much more likely that those 2 will be elected. So at this stage, it looks like 3 Liberals. The other problem for the Liberals, they've got nearly 60% of the vote, but it's nearly all tied up in Peter Gutwin's surplus, and there'll be a bit of leakage out of that ticket, I suspect. A lot of votes for him personally that may flow to other tickets. If we go to Braddon, Jeremy Rockcliffe is re-elected. I'm pretty confident Felix Ellis has been re-elected. It's then between Adam Brooks and Roger Jensch for the third. Jensch? I used to work with Dean Jensch, of course. Roger Jensch is competing with Adam Brooks for that 3rd Liberal seat. And Shane Broad and Anita Dow are expected. They're ahead of anybody else on their own in their own vote. So the other votes should elect both of them. So they're both re-elected. Lyons will work down the state. On the Liberal ticket, Guy Barnett and Mark Shelton are re-elected. Probably John Tucker. Rebecca White was the first elected. And then it's between Janet Lambert and Jen Butler to get elected. This is the same contest last time, and in the last time, Jen Butler was elected on Rebecca White's surplus. It's down to that same situation this time. In Franklin, as elected, we've got Jackie Petrusma, Dean Winter, David O'Byrne, and Rosalie Woodruff are elected. Alison Standen is defeated, and it's quite likely that Nick Street will win that 2nd seat. His vote's not that high, but you'd expect his Jackie Petrusma's surplus would flow towards him. And one of the other, I think Dean Young, I think his preferences might be more likely to flow. The other ones are from different parts of the electorate. And then Clark, which is a much more complex contest. Elise Archer's re-elected, Ella Haddad is re-elected, Cassie O'Connor is re-elected. And just to do the party totals on this electorate, to explain why I've only given 3 away there. The second Liberal is between Simon Barakis and Madeleine Ogilvie, who are neck and neck. Labor is unlikely to get beyond the 1 quota. Christy Johnson and Sue Hickey are probably competing for the same seat. I think the only way they can both be elected is if the Liberals only elect 1 member. If one of them's elected, I think there'll be 2 Liberals, and that gives the government a majority. So we've slowest count, only 41% will be coming back to Clark through the night. But that last seat, if that Liberal vote continues to go up, the Liberals will get 2 seats and have a majority.
Thanks for that, Anthony. Now, of course, democracy. It is a celebration of democracy here tonight. We're going back to the tally room floor in Leon Compton. You've got a group of Year 10s getting up and close and personal with democracy.
Well, up close and personal, but of course socially distanced appropriately, Saba. That's exactly right. It's been interesting on the floor of Parliament, or rather on the floor of the tally room, Australia's last tally room, as the night goes on, to watch the parents who have brought their youngsters, some of them in their pyjamas, leave and get everyone home to bed. But for the next group of people that we're talking to, it's been a chance for the first time to watch a tally room in operation. Some very politically interested Year 10 students from Taroona High. Sam is here with Ewan and Toby and Nicholas, and they've all come down to watch the political process unfold. Sam, good evening to you.
Good evening, Leon.
Sam, the election result, as you talk about it with your friends, is this something like what you expected?
Yeah, I think broadly it is what I expected. Like the overwhelming narrative, I think, in the media recently is that the Liberals are on track, most likely to win a second term in office, whether that be majority, which seems most likely at the moment, or in a minority with the support of 1 or 2 independents. I mean, yes, broadly I think the result is what we expected, even if there have been some slightly interesting little things here and there.
Am I right that you're not all politics students? You're not all studying politics at
No,
Taroona High School?
not all of us are humanities students. Some of us do humanities students. Some of us do humanities at Taroona with some really excellent teachers, but no, not all of us are.
Sam, one of the criticisms of this campaign was that the major parties, there was, beyond the Greens, there was no climate policy until the last couple of days from the Liberal Party, and that was largely about recycling and electric vehicles. But beyond that, very little of what some people might think of as under 18s issues discussed. Was that your experience of the campaign?
Yeah, that was my experience of the campaign. I think the coverage of the issues, especially on climate change, which we view as an existential threat to humanity, that is the overwhelmingly most important issue to all voters, to all people under 18 who will soon be voters in the next state election. There was just not enough coverage of climate change, which is the most pressing issue that we see in our future.
Ewan, can I just go to you? I mean, what were the issues? And Sam, if you could pass the microphone, please, to Ewan. Ewan, what were the issues that were important to you in this campaign that you wanted to see the major parties discussing?
Well, mine, like Sam, was mainly climate change because it's just such a big threat that a lot of much older voters, of people who can vote, it's not as important to them as it is to us, because we're so much younger. And if it's not tackled now, very possibly it could be horrendous for us in the future.
To all of you, thank you for stopping by and talking with us. Sabra, it is interesting that as we start to have the night unfold, what typically happens in the tally room is starting to happen now. So candidates who have sadly watched their hopes of election disappear through the course of the evening are starting to file in and meet with others, indeed across political lines, and console each other. I saw Beck Enders, the Mayor of the Huon Valley, come through a little earlier this evening. She'll be returning to local government and won't be taking her place in Parliament, it seems. Bastian Seidel, Dr Bastian Seidel, the Labor spokesperson on health in this campaign, has also made his way in. We might catch up with him a little later. But you can really feel the tally room starting to buzz now as people build up, and over the next hour or two expect the leaders of both parties to come in and make their speeches.
And Leon, given how eloquent those young men were, you and I could be out of a job next election.
I've got to say, Sabra, I'm getting a little bit nervous. There are so many young people in here, and I'm amazed at how many of them, their mums and dads are with them, and I say, oh, you brought your child along, and they're saying, no. Our child brought us along and said they wanted to come in tonight. And I know that there's lots of young people watching at home. I've got lots of parents texting me and telling me that they're sitting up. So yeah, to all the young people who are watching this unfold around us, it's a really interesting night and a great chance to be here and watch it happen live in ways that doesn't happen around the rest of the country.
No, brilliant. Thanks, Leon.
During the election campaign, there were lots of people making complaints about the education system. None of those concerns were on display during that interview.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Julie Collins, how are you feeling right now, given that the last run-through that we had from Anthony? Are you more despondent?
No, as I said, I was hoping for majority government, but the reality is we're always against it, and given what we've seen in other states post-COVID, Hare Clark being what it is, it's always very difficult. So I think it looks like we're going to hold our own, and I think that's doing pretty well.
I'm
going to go and recruit a few of those young men, though, I think, to the Labor Party if I get a chance.
Not if I beat you first, right?
Well, it sounds like both of you need to do work on your environment policies if you're to recruit them.
Message received. I heard them speak.
It's an interesting point, actually, Guy, because, and I'm sure Senator McKim would be happy to pick up on this one, I don't know that we saw an environment policy from the Labor Party during the campaign.
We did release one, but I think it was late, yes.
And how was that publicised?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest, Emily, but I do know that we did have a policy, yes, because I know that our shadow spokesperson, Alison Standen, worked on it, and there was stuff around climate change, around electric cars and a range of other issues.
You're shaking your head, Nick McKim.
Oh, look, how incredible is it? We're in the early to mid 21st century, and neither of the major parties released a climate policy for this election. It just didn't happen. The greatest challenge facing humanity, and the two major parties just walked away and pretended that climate was not an issue. And unlike both of those parties, the Greens did release strong climate policy, and we're not owned by the big corporations like both of the other major parties are. So we've got the strength to stand up against the big loggers, the big miners, the big gaming corporations that bought the Liberal Party the election 3 years ago. I mean, it was a lock, stock and smoking barrel purchase of the last election for the Liberal Party by big gaming corporations, and you can see both major parties are too scared to stand up and take the big corporates on, because of course the big corporates donate to both major parties. It's institutionalised bribery, political donations, and we urgently need political donations law reform in Tasmania, promised years ago by Peter Gutwein and not delivered.
Senator McKim, you talk about the last election being bought presumably through the Love Your Local campaign. We've seen the Bob Brown Foundation putting huge posters up around the state telling people to green your vote. Do you think that their contributions, obviously towards your campaign, should be counted in your donations?
Well, I think there's absolutely a case for third-party contributions to a campaign. So that's any organisation that's not a political party itself, that those should be recorded, and there's an argument there for a cap on expenditure both for political parties and for third-party organisations. But the point is the Liberals have had 3 years to address this. A lot of Tasmanians were very distressed about what happened last time. Peter Gutwein has promised for years to introduce political donations reform and has just failed to do it because, of course, the Liberals, as Julie rightly points out, trouser a lot more donations than the Labor Party. And by the way, the Labor Party takes a lot more political donations than the Greens do. And we're always fighting with one arm tied behind our back because we simply can't compete in terms of expenditure with the other parties. But we have the weakest political donations disclosure laws in the country. It's shameful for democracy because what we should be engaged in is a contest of ideas, not a contest of who's got the fattest wallet.
All right, we're going to go to Rosalie Woodruff now, who's at the Greens headquarters, the party there at the Brunswick Hotel. But first, we're going to get a run-through of her seat of Franklin.
The Liberal Party on 2.45 quotas, the Labor Party 2. The Greens on 1.18. We're pretty sure now of who's been elected. We're saying Jackie Petrus from Nick Street are elected, David O'Byrne and Dean Winter for the Labor Party. Rosalie Woodruff is elected and Alison Standen has been defeated. And the change in vote there, this is the one electorate where the Liberal Party has had a poor performance, almost certainly because of the retirement of Will Hodgman. But the Green vote is up substantially in the electorate as well.
Thanks, Anthony. Rosalie Woodruff, congratulations. It looks like you've got a good swing going to you, 4.8%. What do you put that down to?
Look, I put it down... I put it down to a lot of hard work and a lot of honesty from the Greens about the issues that we stand up for and the issues that we prepared to represent people on. And I think what we've heard on the doors and what we've heard resoundingly across Franklin as we've spoken to people at this election is that people really, they want integrity, they want truth in politics, but they also want the money that we could have in Tasmania to put into the services that people desperately need, health, education and housing. They want that money, which we can get if we just get corporations to pay their fair share. So people understand that the Greens will always put the environment and our climate as urgent action items. But I think people really understood this election that we are backing them. We are behind them. We are standing up for people who want a house. We're standing up for people who want to be able to get to the hospital. We're standing up for children who want to have a great education. And I think the positive story that we had to tell is really reflected in the vote that we've got.
Rosalie, it's Emily Baker here. Obviously a much more relaxing night for you this time than last state election, but perhaps not such a relaxing night for the Liberal leader Peter Gutwein. It does seem possible that we'll have a hung parliament here in Tasmania. How do the Greens propose to work with, say, the Liberal Party should that come to fruition?
Well, we'll do what we've always done. We'll put the people who voted for us and the issues they care about first and foremost. We will make sure that we negotiate in good faith. We'll make sure we don't do secret deals. And we'll make sure that we put the issues that people have voted for, urgent action on climate, real change on health, real homes for people, they will be first and foremost. And of course, cleaning up the political system in Tasmania, cleaning up donations reform, these are all things which are overdue from before the last election. And people, I think, can see that the Liberals and the Labor Party promised things and they've never delivered on them. So unfortunately for Peter Gutwein, he might not get the outcome he wanted, but fortunately for the people of Tasmania, the Greens will be there, willing to negotiate and to work on these urgent issues and get some real change.
And to pick up on that point about a willingness to negotiate, the Greens have been the ogres of this campaign, according to the other parties, because often when we look towards a hung parliament, the Greens show what could be characterised as an inability to compromise or negotiate on issues, particularly environmental issues. Over the next term, do you think the Greens might change your approach and work towards getting all parties on board with the possibility of minority parliaments into the future?
Well, I think what we've seen from the Greens, what we've always stood for over 40 years is a consistent and strong position. And I think that's exactly what people want in Tasmania. They don't want backflips. They don't want people to change their mind because they've done a secret deal. They don't want people to stop representing them on the issues they say they care about at elections, but after elections they'll change their positions. So people know when they vote for the Greens what we will stand on. And of course we want to get outcomes for Tasmanians. Of course we will be doing everything we can, as we always have done, Cassie and I, in Parliament, to get compromises and to get really fantastic outcomes. That's what we're going to continue doing, and that's what people can look forward to seeing from us.
Rosalie, obviously a lively party behind you tonight. We'll let you get back to it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Emily.
You're watching Tasmania Votes from the tally room in Hobart. It's just gone 9:25 with 57% of the vote counted. Hello, I'm Sabra Lane.
And I'm Guy Stainer. Let's get the lay of the land with Anthony.
Yep, the party vote shares, we've been talking for a while, haven't changed much. The Liberals, but mid-48s, Labor 28, Greens just under 13. The change in vote, 2% down for the Liberals, 4.5% for Labor, most of that due to the result in Clark. The Greens up 2.6, most of that due to Clark and Franklin. The chamber, the seats were definitely giving away. We say the Liberals have a definite 12, the Labor has a definite 6, and there are 2 Greens. And if we add a few more likelies, which we think are likely to occur, it gets Labor 9, Greens 2, Liberals 12, which is 23. That's 2 seats in doubt, which is basically the last 2 seats in Clark, which is why I will now go and have a quick look at Clark and just explain what's going on here. It's a bit hard to be absolutely definite on who's won, who's not won, but everything's pointing in a particular direction. There are 3 members elected. Elise Archer for the Liberal Party, Cassie O'Connor for the Greens, and Ella Haddad from the Labor Party. The Labor Party vote has gone up as some more Glenorchy figures have come in. So where do the last 2 seats go? Now, some of that will work up to be, I think it's a contest between the second Liberal and Christy Johnson, unless the only way Sue Hickey can be elected as well as Christy Johnson is from leakage out of the Liberal ticket. Is that she's behind Christy Johnson, and I can't... maybe she'll get a flow from Labor. Actually, I can't see. Christy Johnson would do better on preferences from Labor than who's Sue Hickey. I think maybe Green preferences would help Sue Hickey, but she still has to get ahead of Christy Johnson. So I can't see how Sue Hickey gets elected. If she does get elected, and I think so would Christy Johnson, and there'd only be 1 Liberal. That's why I'm saying it's either 12 Liberals and 2 independents, or 13 Liberals and a majority Liberal government. So there's 50% counted. We're just going to have to wait for more figures to come in there. But I'm not calling Sue Hickey defeated, but she's in the weakest position. Look at the leading candidates there. She's in the weakest position of those. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4. She's the 5th place candidate. Madeleine Ogilvie and Salman Barakas are behind her, but once Elise Archer is elected and the Liberal ticket gets distributed, they'll be ahead of Sue Hickey, and she's 6th. So that's why I don't think Sue Hickey can win from there unless there's something remarkable in the votes to come. So it's down to, if she doesn't win, you're very likely to see a second Liberal and Christy Johnson elected.
Jonathan Dunham, is that almost a sigh of relief? Anthony's pointing that you're getting closer to 13.
Well, we can't count a victory yet, of course. We still have to wait for the votes to, preferences to be distributed, primaries to finalise, counting to be finalised. I can't see, though, however, that many Liberal votes leaking out of our ticket to Sue Hickey once Elise Archer's excess is distributed and other candidates lower down the ticket are cut up. I don't think they'd be heading, based on some of the feedback I've received, the light touch details from some of the booths from scrutiny is I can't see it heading in Sue Hickey's favour, and that's why I remain hopeful and confident that we will pick up that 13th seat.
If Anthony's projection is correct, then what we're seeing is out of the previous parliament, you had Madeleine Ogilvie and Sue Hickey. In the new parliament, you'll have Madeleine Ogilvie and Christy Johnston. Is it all worth it?
We could well have Simon Barakis as well, and look, at the end of the day...
But if Simon Barakis comes in, you don't have Madeleine Ogilvie. So it's either Barakis and Johnston or Ogilvie and Johnston. Is it all worth it? And with Christy Johnston being, some would suggest, a Labor-leaning independent, you've swapped out Sue Hickey, who was a member of your own party, for a Labor-leaning independent.
Look, at the end of the day, what we're after is majority government. And so if that is what we achieve in 13 seats, then yes, it has been worth it.
So it's worth it to spend the extra money with an early election for effectively the status quo.
It's important that this state has a stable majority government to make sure we as a government in this state can manage the programs, the processes, and chart the course we need to as we emerge from COVID. Absolutely essential.
I put it to you that this projected parliament would look less stable than the one that you had.
I respectfully disagree because I believe that 2 independents on the floor is worse than having a locked-in 13-seat majority.
What about Adam Brooks's vote? Does that mean you're going to accept Adam Brooks's vote, Jonathan?
So if, Julia Collins, you're presupposing the outcome of any investigation, which I gather that is what you are doing.
No, I'm asking a question about whether you'll be relying on Adam Brooks's vote.
Well, if Adam Brooks
he gets elected.
If Adam Brooks is elected, and as has already been publicly canvassed, he himself has denied the allegations that have been made, and on top of that there's an investigation underway. I believe in due process and justice, and it should be done through a proper process, not through an election night panel, and we'll see what happens. Let the votes be counted and let the investigation occur.
Now, that's a good point. Let the votes be counted. We're going to go to Anthony Green now for an update on what's happening in the Legislative Council.
Yeah, and then I'll do a quick wrap on Bass, because there's a few interesting things there. Now, let me go back to go home. In Derwent, a great central electorate, 72% counted. Craig Farrell's on 48.8. He won't lose from there. So Craig Farrell has been re-elected in Derwent. In the other electorate, Windermere, 68% counted. Now, this is more interesting. Given you don't get strong preference flows in these electorates, Nick Duigan would be predicted to win that. There won't be strong flows to preferences from those 3 independents unless, from what I understand. And with 5 candidates, I think you start to get exhaustion. I think they can do 3 or 4 preferences. I can't remember. It's a complex system in the upper house, but I think Nick Duigan is far enough ahead to be pretty confident of winning. Now, just to check my numbers, the Legislative Council has a long history of being dominated by independents. At the moment in the council, there are 5 Labor members, 3 Liberals and 7 independents. That's the most party representatives in the council's history. So that's this will be another upper house member from a political party, and continues that trend towards the political parties getting into the Legislative Council. Now, I wanted to go back and just talk about Braddon for a minute, because there's an interesting scenario going on there, whether the Greens can win the seat there or not. As you can see there, the Liberals on 3.58, Labor 1.52, the Greens on 0.61. You might think there that the Greens are ahead of the second Labor candidate. Now, the difficulty is, just remember that 0.61 there, that's the total for the Greens. If you look at the candidates themselves, one of the Labor candidates is already ahead of 0.61, and Janie Finlay on 0.53 will get ahead of 0.61 on the other Labor candidates' preferences. So both of those Labor candidates are going to end up somewhere between 0.7 and 0.8. So while it looks like the Greens are ahead of the second Labor candidate, when you look up at the cut-up of the vote between the Labor candidates, both Labor candidates are ahead of the Green total. So still, Bass looks like being 3-2. I do think, looking at those party totals, there will be leakage out of that Liberal ticket. There's a big vote there for Peter Gutwin, but I can't see how the Greens get ahead of both Labor candidates, so it still looks like 3-2.
Thank you, Anthony. We've got Labor member for Clark, Ella Haddad, standing by to chat to us. I think, Anthony, we just need to come back to you to check on how Ella Haddad is going in the seat of Clark.
Well, we got half the vote counted now. Liberals 1.82, Greens 1.34. Labor's vote's risen to 1.3. There was a delay in the Glenorchy count because some of the northern booths were in the upper house seat of Derwent, and so it slowed down the count. Let's look at the leaders that's going on here. We'll look at just the Labor ticket, actually. Ella Haddad is on 0.78, but there's dribs and drabs with the other four candidates. They will all be excluded one by one. Put Ella Haddad over a quota, and she'll probably reach a quota, but the last candidate will only have about 0.25 quotas, which doesn't help them get elected. So Ella Haddad has been elected, but it doesn't look like she'll elect a running mate.
Thank you, Anthony. Ella Haddad. Hello, Ella Haddad. Congratulations, you have been re-elected.
Hi, Guy.
But you are the only Labor candidate elected in Clark. It must be bittersweet.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, it is encouraging to be re-elected. I'm very proud to represent my electorate of Clark, but of course we were hoping that we would be in a position to return Labor to a position of 2 seats in Clark, and very sadly it looks like that might not be the case.
Ella, it's Emily Baker here. We had last state election, Scott Bacon leading your ticket effectively with almost 12,000 votes. You've received about a third of that, and then looking like being the only Labor member elected in Clark tonight. How does Labor plan to recover those votes?
Thanks, Emily. Look, there's no doubt that losing Scott Bacon's vote has been a blow to Labor. He is a good friend of mine and a good friend to the Labor Party, and we worked very closely together. There's no doubt it has been tough being the only Labor member in Clark for the last few years, and I will continue to work as hard as I possibly can to continue to represent my party and represent the people of Clark who need Labor representatives to represent them, and that's what I'll continue to do.
And we saw, of course, as we've discussed earlier, the huge kerfuffle around Ben McGregor, who was running in Clark. What impact do you think that issue had on your campaign?
Well, Emily, I think my personal result shows that I've been working hard in this electorate, and I've continued to work hard, and I think my personal result tonight has shown that. And honestly, the mood for Labor has improved in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. We've been hearing really encouraging stories and encouragement on the doors. So I think it is sad that we might not look like we're getting back to a position of 2 seats in Clark, but it was always the electorate to watch. It's certainly been a complex race.
And on the results that we have now, there has been a swing against Labor in general. What does this mean for Rebecca White, and do you support her as leader?
Absolutely, Emily. And you know what? We've seen oppositions around the state, around the country rather, be completely wiped out, and we've seen governments returned in a landslide through the COVID-19 pandemic. That's not what Peter Gutwein has delivered for his party tonight. We haven't seen a landslide victory, and I think that it shows how calculated the Liberal Party has been in going to an election a year early, arguably to capitalise on COVID-19, which has been a success for all Tasmanians who have worked hard to get us through the pandemic. I think that that's part of what's been shown tonight.
And we heard from Dean Winter earlier, who's been elected in Franklin. He made what I took as a coded message about needing 2 strong major parties and a battle of ideas, particularly within the Labor Party. Do you think that there needs to be change in the way that the factions are run and the particular dominance of the left faction?
I think what we need is strong Labor candidates, and that's what we've seen across Tasmania. I've been incredibly proud to campaign alongside every single person who's put their name up for pre-selection in the Labor Party this time round. There's no doubt we were the underdog and we were up against it, partly because, of course, you know, incumbent governments have been favoured as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think every single person who has put their hand up for election in the Labor Party this time around has worked their guts out and has worked incredibly hard and has a lot to be proud of.
Okay, thanks, Ella Haddad.
Julie Collins, had Labor been a united team from the get-go and the internal fighting hadn't been the story for 10 days, might we be talking about a different story tonight?
Well, I think we managed to turn the campaign around. As I said, it was, not the beginning we'd hoped for the campaign, but we did focus on health and it was starting to resonate. Maybe if we'd had a bit longer, we might have got closer, but certainly to hold our own when what we've seen around the country, I think is extraordinary. I think when Peter Gutwein called this election, everybody was expecting a huge landslide win, and here we are after 9:30 p.m. on election night, and they still can't call a majority government, and even if they can, they're relying on the vote of Adam Brooks, perhaps.
Julie, you say it's not the beginning that you'd hoped for, but that was entirely within the party's control, that we had these candidate controversies that were entirely linked to the party's own behaviour. How are you going to fix that?
Well, we weren't the only party that had controversies with candidates in the beginning. Even the government that called the election, that knew it was going to happen, had controversies. We had the Greens wipe all their candidates' social media history so that they didn't get into any trouble with any of their candidates. I think because of the suddenness of the election, we were relying on candidates who filled out, and we would go through the vetting process to tell us everything we needed to know because of the time frame in which we had to operate.
We might now go to Leon Compton, who's on the floor of the tally room. And Leon, I understand you're hearing some whispers about maybe when Beck White might be showing up.
Yeah, I am, Guy. So it's we're looking at 9:39 now, and I'm being told that she may be coming into the tally room here at the Grand Chancellor Hotel as soon as the next 8 or 9 minutes' time. Some of the signs of that have started to become evident too. A lot of the people that have been working with the Labor organisation through the 5-week campaign are starting to file in now, and you can hear a bit of a buzz building. And as I say, it's particularly dominated by people who are part of the Labor tribe at the moment. So quite likely that Rebecca White is going to be coming into this room. I can see that Dr. Bastian Seidel, their health spokesperson, along with Rebecca White, the person that carried the responsibility for much of the promotion of Labor through this campaign, has moved down towards the front of the room. Other Labor people telling me that they're expecting her shortly. And so a speech, as we've heard from the panel before, clearly, while it's uncertain whether or not the Liberals will form a majority, not the result in this election that Labor were hoping for. Back to you.
Thanks, Leon. Julie Collins, what are you expecting to hear, or I should say hoping to hear, from Rebecca White?
Well, I'm sure that Rebecca will talk about the campaign. She'll talk about health and how important it is that we actually get some action from the government if they end up in majority. Certainly, we've seen neglect over the last 7 years. We're always up against it with what happened with COVID. People were expecting the government to win in a landslide, and that certainly hasn't happened tonight.
Anthony Green, you've got some insights?
I was just going to say that both leaders said they wouldn't form minority government. The Labor Party can't possibly form majority government. There's no sensible way to government in this parliament based on the numbers we're seeing. So it would be sensible if the Labor Party says we're not prepared to form minority government, so we're conceding defeat. It's then up to the Liberal Party Premier that has to offer advice to the Governor if he doesn't have a majority. It's always a position that people get mistaken about how our system works. We elect a parliament. The parliament then doesn't elect the leader. We have inherited the Westminster system. The governor anoints someone as the government, and then the parliament may accept that government or reject that government with a vote of no confidence. But the government, as David Bartlett tried, can't just go to the governor and say, appoint the other side, because that might embarrass the Crown, because the first sitting might defeat that government the governor just voted. The best position for a governor after an election like this is you reappoint the current government and let the parliament say what they think of the government and the election result, rather than the governor intervene and then the parliament express their view on the governor's decision.
Jonathan Dunniam, is it time that political leaders in Tasmania stop committing political suicide before elections?
Well, I think it's important that we provide what this state needs, and the best way to do that is through majority government. That's why both leaders of both major parties said that their government, should they be elected, will be in the form of a majority government, and that's what we need to get our legislative program through and have the certainty and stability needed to make sure that the state can weather the storm that no doubt we'll encounter as we continue to emerge from COVID.
Surely it would be wise to let the people speak and then make decisions on what the outcome is from the people.
Well, ultimately after an election, we do rely on the outcome, the votes that have been cast by the people. But at the end of the day, what we do through the duration of an election campaign is make a pitch. this is what we're going to do, this is what we need in terms of support from you to do it, and that's why we pitch for majority government to give effect to that agenda.
Can I jump in there, Senator? You're talking about majority government and the benefits that brings, and undoubtedly we've seen the economy in good shape over the past 7 years for the most part. But we're also hearing these stories of horrible situations in the health system in particular. We had in the Examiner at one point during the campaign an 87-year-old man laying on the floor of the LGH with pneumonia, a baby waiting 27 hours in a cubicle of the Royal. What's the point of majority government, I suppose, in a stable economy if we're not delivering basic services to the needs that Tasmanians have?
Well, you've referenced a period of time where our health system has been under more pressure than ever before. Not only are you dealing with all of the regular stresses related to a health system, the elective surgery that is conducted, the emergency procedures, all of the other allied health services, but dealing with a pandemic as well, and making sure that the services needed out in the community through the various remote clinics are also on offer. So dealing with those particular pressures has, of course, put things under pressure. But having said all of that, majority government is the best tool that you can have through democracy to make sure that you can provide those services. You are less likely to be able to do so with minority government, where economies tank, jobs are lost, people pay less tax to support these essential services. That's where we fail.
Can I pick you up on that? Surely
we will be getting some clarity on this, because I'm just hearing that Peter Gutwin is expected to speak at 10:20. So.
That is welcome news.
And your federal colleagues are obviously feeling quite confident. One of them has said to me they're very confident of getting 2 seats in Clark.
Well, I, like my federal colleague that you have read a social media post from, believe that based on historical performances in the electorate of Clark, where we did at 29.8% of the primary vote score 2 seats, I hope we can do the same again, because it's what we need in this state, particularly now more than ever.
Julie Collins, what does this all mean for Beck White and her leadership?
Well, we'll do what we do at the end of every election, and we'll analyse the results carefully, and we'll do a review into the election results, and we do that every time, win or lose. But there's no doubt Rebecca White has been a strong leader throughout this campaign, and she campaigned really hard on the issue of health in the last few weeks, which was really starting to resonate.
Does she stay in the job?
Well, that's a decision to be made afterwards, and obviously, you know, Rebecca has been a strong leader. We don't know the makeup yet of the PLP and who might be there, so let's wait and see for that to happen yet.
Very few leaders get or suffer 2 election defeats and get a chance at a third. Why should Beck White?
Well, she's only been there 4 years. Will Hodgman, of course, was leader of the opposition for 8 years before he became Premier. So this has happened before. I think, given the circumstances, we've actually polled incredibly well. Given what we've seen in other states and territories, we've had oppositions wiped out, essentially in Western Australia, and a very strong swing towards the incumbent government in Queensland. That's not what we've seen here tonight. It's a very different story, and we still don't know the results of Clark yet. There's still only 50% of the vote counted in Clark, so I think anything could happen when we've only got half the vote counted.
But Julie, given that the Labor vote hasn't risen either, is maintaining the status quo in terms of keeping Rebecca White as leader and keeping the party operating as it is that going to help the Labor Party improve its vote?
Well, as I said, we do a review of every election campaign. Once the PLP is formed and we know who it is, there'll be a discussion with the administration of the Labor Party, as always occurs after an election.
Nick McKim, the major parties are always going to back in their position and the stance that they've taken to the election. What kind of change would you like to see in Tasmanian politics?
Oh, well, I'd like to see major party leaders basically mature up, grow up, and stop running fear campaigns, as they always do, against minority governments. I mean, we have seen in the last 3 terms of minority government here in Tasmania a situation where we have actually seen governments delivering. We've seen vast amounts of Tasmania protected into national parks and World Heritage areas that occurred including in the period 2010 to 2014. We've seen gun law reform, we've seen gay law reform. I mean, minority governments take on the hard issues. Majority governments are simply rubber stamps. They use the parliament as rubber stamps for decisions that are made behind closed doors of cabinet. So Minority governments are actually governments for grown-ups. Majority governments allow for the kind of childish and petulant behaviour that we've seen from both Rebecca White and Peter Gutwein in this election. I've got to say to Julie, that's pretty good spin, but the Labor Party's had a 4% swing against it around the state. It's had a 20% swing against it on the numbers we've currently got in Clark. That is not a good result, and we were never going to get a wipeout like the Western Australian election. Hare Clark just simply doesn't allow for that. So we were never going to see a wipeout of the opposition. I reckon that's a pretty poor result for Labor, unfortunately, because I genuinely think if they hadn't fumbled their Clark candidacy so early on with all the saga around Ben McGregor, we may be having a very different conversation tonight about whether or not the Liberals are going to win majority.
The vote is down for both the major parties, nearly 2% for the Libs, above 4% for Labor. The vote for the Greens is up, the vote for independents is up. Do you think this is actually going to put an end to this type of scare campaign about minority governments?
Oh, look, I don't think so. I'm an optimist, but look, I think they'll keep running it because I think they think it works for them politically. But, gee, I tell you what, the story would be very different if Peter Gutwein...
Just going to cut in there. We've got Rebecca White walking into the tally room here.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Please sit down. First, as a reflection of our recognition of the deep history and culture of this island, I wish to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Palawa people of the land on which we stand today, Lutruwita, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and Aboriginal rights. Ladies and gentlemen, it is clear tonight that we have fallen short of our goal to win majority Labor government. A short time ago, I rang Peter Gutwein to congratulate him on his re-election and his impressive personal result. All around the country, we've seen incumbent governments rewarded for their management of COVID-19, and there is no doubt that Peter Gutwein and our public health officials kept our community safe, and tonight's result reflects that. Peter Gutwein did call an early election because he wanted this election to be about his management of COVID-19, and tonight's outcome is a strong result for the Liberal Party and Peter Gutwein's leadership. But this election has also seen the elevation of other issues that matter to Tasmanians. And it is so important that the government listens to the concerns that have been raised throughout the course of this campaign, because the stories of Tasmanians who have been left behind cannot continue to be ignored. I hope this campaign has been a wake-up call for the Liberals that Tasmanians will not tolerate business as usual from the Liberal government. Tasmanians will not tolerate surgery waiting lists that are the worst in the country. They will not tolerate ambulance response times that are slowest in the country. And they will not tolerate Tasmanians dying in the emergency department because they can't access the healthcare they need. And Tasmanians will not continue to tolerate the endless infrastructure promises that are never fulfilled. Just because we have fallen short of forming government at this election, it does not mean that we will stop fighting to make Tasmania a better and a fairer place. Labor put forward a positive plan at this election to create more jobs for Tasmanians, to invest in the essential services like health and housing and education, and to make people's lives better. I'm proud of the campaign that we ran and for each of our candidates for their hard work. And I want to thank our incredible candidates who come from all walks of life and worked tirelessly knocking on doors, making calls, standing on street stalls and meeting thousands upon thousands of Tasmanians. You should all be so proud of the way that you've run your campaign. I also want to thank very much the incredible volunteers who've been tireless in their efforts to support the Labor team this election. You truly are amazing. And I want to acknowledge the members at this election who've lost their seats. And in particular, I want to acknowledge and to thank Jennifer Houston, a proud Palawa woman who has dedicated her life to her community, and to thank her for her contribution to our party and our parliament. And I also want to thank my friend Alison Standen, who's been a champion for the people of Franklin and a hard-working member of the Labor team. I don't believe that this will be the last that we see of Ali, because she's such a talent and someone who has so much to offer to the Tasmanian Parliament. I also want to thank every member of our campaign team, and in particular Stuart Benson, the State Secretary, for your incredible work and your leadership, not just through this campaign, but for many years now, and I thank you very much for that and your friendship. I want to thank my incredible staff, many are in this room with us today. I am in awe of your work ethic, your dedication, your compassion, and your ability to deliver outcomes for people. It is inspiring and it motivates me every single day. I want to thank my Parliamentary Labor Party colleagues, and I see some of them in this room. You are the best group of people I've ever worked with. We are a strong team, and I know that together we'll keep working incredibly hard for the people who've put their trust and faith in us to represent them in the Tasmanian Parliament. I am incredibly proud to call each and every one of you a friend. The Federal Parliamentary Labor Party, and in particular our Federal Labor leader Anthony Albanese and members of his shadow cabinet who've joined us in this campaign trail here in Tasmania, your support, your friendship and your interest in Tasmania is well noted. We are so lucky to have a strong Labor movement across the country that comes out in force to support our Labor campaigns no matter where they occur. And I in particular want to thank Anthony for the work that he's done to support the Tasmanian campaign this election. And of course my family, my husband Rod and my dad who are here tonight, my mum who's looking after my beautiful daughter Mia. You put up with a lot, but you're always there by my side, and I really couldn't do it without you, so thank you so much. We started this campaign with the promise that Labor would work hard every day for Tasmania. We may have fallen short of winning government this time around, but I want to thank all of those Tasmanians who put their faith in Labor. We won't let you down. We will continue to work hard each and every day, and we will keep standing up for those Tasmanians who deserve a fair go. Thank you, everybody.
There you go. Labor leader, Rebecca White.
Receiving a standing ovation from sections of the crowd here tonight.
And conceding that they cannot get up, but parts of that speech sounded very much like the campaign was continuing about fighting hard for those who are on hospital waiting lists. She said nothing about her own future there, Julie Collins.
I think what we saw there was a very gracious speech from Rebecca. It was short, but it really hit on the points that the government will now need to deliver, and will need to deliver when it comes to people who are sitting on those health waiting lists, those Tasmanians that are waiting years for social housing, those Tasmanians have been doing it tough, and the infrastructure that they've been promising. They've had 7 years, and now is the time to deliver. The Premier and the Liberal Party have made a huge number of promises to Tasmanians. It's about time they actually delivered them, and I think that that's what we heard from Rebecca. We've got a strong team, even though it's the same as it was before we went into this election, but they are a very strong and committed team, and I'm sure that they'll be holding the government to account for their promises.
Jonathan Dunham, Rebecca White was magnanimous in acknowledging Peter Gutwin's performance in managing COVID. She congratulated him not only on winning but also in keeping the community safe, but she also very much put the heat on him by throwing the ball very much into his court and talking about him winning the election and governing.
Well, I suppose that's a good thing in the sense that I still remain of the view, as I have all night, that I believe we will achieve a majority through having that 13th seat come to the Liberal Party. And look, that is an incredibly difficult speech to deliver for any political leader. It is very, very difficult for any leader of a major party to concede defeat, and so I think there was quite a level of grace in Rebecca's speech. There is difficulty though. I mean, Julie made a point before about Will Hodgman having been a leader for a long time before he won an election. The reality is he was only unsuccessful at one of them, and that was 2010. Now Beck White has been unsuccessful at two. It does draw into question her capacity to continue to lead. And I think Tasmanians, as part of understanding what the future makeup of the Parliament's going to look like, would like to know what the Labor Party intend to do with leadership. Is it going to be David O'Byrne or someone else that will lead the Labor Party after today? That was silent. I think that is always an important point to make, particularly for those who have been unsuccessful twice.
We can hear the tom-toms drumming in the background. I'm not quite sure that the beats have changed, though. Anthony Green, what can you add to this discussion?
Well, look, there's not much we can add, really. We're continuing to wait for something from Clark. So it's getting that time of night where I'm starting to forget what I'm doing. In Clark, the party told us we've still got 50%. Basically, we've got the Glenorchy and the Hobart pre-poll to come. And I'm not... Sorry, not... Yeah. I can't hear you, but yeah.
What we're hearing in the background is that the Leader of the Greens, Cassie O'Connor, will be speaking in 10 minutes' time. Back to you, Anthony.
A lot of noise coming in our ears, which isn't coming through the microphone. So we're waiting for the two big pre-polls and some postals and a couple of smaller booths, but there's nothing which indicates Sue Hickey can catch up. You can't get two independents up in that seat, is what I'm saying. If you get one independent up, the Liberals will win the second one. And there's nothing to indicate that that's the change. I think the Liberals are probably one update away from us saying they've got two seats in Clark and majority government. We're just waiting for an update.
How many booths have you got to come in yet for Clark?
I think it's 7, but the three big ones are the postals and the Glenorchy and Hobart pre-polls. They will be the biggest batches of votes. Now, I suspect that the independents will not do well on postals and pre-polls. That tends to be the way. So when we get another update, we may be able to say whether the government's majority or minority.
All right.
But I'm leaning heavily towards the Liberals have got 13 seats.
A question for Jonathan Dunniam. The Mercury newspaper endorsed the Liberal Party yesterday, but said if the Liberal Party is re-elected, it's a government on notice that the long elective surgery waiting list, which arguably can't all be put down to coronavirus, the 51,000 person specialist waiting list, mean that this is a government on notice. Would you agree with that assessment?
Governments between every election are always on notice because in 4 short years or less in some circumstances, they then have to front up to the voters and be held to account for their performance.